I got to play Kingdom Come Deliverance 2.
Oh, I hope they've got a good physician at this castle. Or at least a barber.
And I RP'd my Henry as an outstanding role model citizen for 15th century Bohemia. Well, except when he catch me stealing.
You've no business here. Leave, or I'll call the... Help, for God's sake! Help!
You're a dead man.
Or if you're someone that minds your own business. Hey, bub, you working hard? They're hardly working at all. Or if your name just happens to be Innkeeper Betty.
What are you doing here?
My bad. But don't worry, y'all. Karma's a bitch, and I paid the price. In the pillory. With the cane. In the pillory again.
This isn't a mess, is it? Fuck off.
And again. And a pack of wild dogs ate me alive. Hey, little cutie. I'm getting a cat. All in Kingdom Come Deliverance 2. Kingdom Come Deliverance 2 is an immersive first-person medieval RPG that's launching on PC, PS5, and Xbox Series X and S on February 4th. Although I did turn down a sponsorship offer for this first impressions type video, I did let PlayOn cover my travel costs to come check out the game early in New York City. With that said, anyone that watches my channel would know that covering my travel costs doesn't guarantee positive coverage from old Wolfie. In this video, I will not be showing any of what I would consider spoilers, and although I personally played for 6 to 7 hours in total, everything that you see will be from the prologue section of the game, or content that you can reach within the first hour or two after that. Chapter markers below, let's begin.
Dentes fortuna juvat!
And starting off with the prologue section, and when I say prologue, I'm referring to the content that you'll experience before you reach the opening credits, which is also when you get access to the open world. Some players will spend 2+ hours in this prologue section, and it serves a multi-purpose function. One of the main functions is, of course, to serve as a bit of a tutorial for some of the game's very basic mechanics. It will get you eating food when you're hungry. Just don't overeat, as that will slow you down. You'll learn how important sleep is, how bandages can save your life from bleeding out. You'll even get to play with your dog, Mutt, a highly requested returning feature. You can actually tell Mutt to heal, stay, or roam free. You have to feed Mutt to keep Mutt happy and obedient. Mutt can sniff out things for you in the environment, and he'll even assist you in combat. There's an entire category of perks in this game called Houndmaster that you can choose to invest into and pick up perks such as Rip and Tear, which accelerates bleeding from wounds inflicted by Mutt, and the Bark perk, which will allow Mutt to cause a distraction for you. And speaking of distractions, KCD2 has introduced the ability to throw pebbles or stones.
What was that sound? All right.
In the prologue, you'll also learn how to stealth a bit.
Use your head. Be careful.
System that has more depth now than it did in the first game. There's even a new stealth detection system. The prologue gets you introduced to several of the menu interfaces, and in a rather immersive way through dialogue, you the player are asked a few questions that will help set up your Henry with a few starting XP boosts in certain stats, depending on your preferred playstyle. This goes for combat and dialogue skills alike. Those of you that played the first game may choose to make your Henry start out somewhat similarly to how your Henry turned out in the first game, or if you're new to the franchise, you can just choose what you think your preferred playstyle will be. None of this is game or playstyle defining though. The prologue also serves as a great introduction to the very basics of combat. You'll duel with Sir Hans Capon, and you'll learn basic attacks. Chain attacks. Block.
Cover, for Christ's sake! Good! Nice!
Perfect block.
That's it!
And riposte.
Good, Henry!
Further combat training post-prologue can be conducted with an NPC named Tomcat that you'll meet very early on if you so choose.
Here's a practice longsword. so we don't hurt each other. Let's see what you've got.
And it is here with Tomcat that you can learn and practice some of the more advanced techniques, such as combos. In this training area, you can practice with any weapon type of your choosing, and you also get to choose the type of weapon that you want to go up against. You can also choose to practice fighting more than one opponent at a time. I really appreciate all the options that are offered here in this training area that allow you, the player, to practice various styles against various types of opponents, but also keep in mind that Henry's stats and skills will be leveling up as well. The combat-specific skills that you'll be leveling up in this game include warfare, swords, heavy weapons, polearms, unarmed, and marksmanship. Now, the more that you use swords, for example, not only will your warfare skill level up, as it's a more general combat skill that will give you some less weapon-specific passive boosts, but also your sword skill will level up because you're using a sword, and the higher that your sword skill is, the faster that you'll be swinging with a sword, the more damage that you'll deal with swords, and the harder it will become for opponents to block your sword attacks. On top of all that, each of these combat skill categories has their own list of perks that you can invest into as you level up. These perks range from the warfare specific perk that's called Rock Solid, which will give you a +20 to armor when you don't sprint or dodge in combat for 10 seconds. So a very tanky defensive favored playstyle perk. To perks such as the polearm perk that's called First Strike, which makes your first attack with a polearm weapon 35% stronger. Then on top of these combat skills, we also have an entire progression tab that's called Combos, which gets even more weapon type specific, and this is where you can unlock combos for the various different types of weapons that you can see right here. And wrapping up this combat section, as someone who enjoyed the first game's combat but also could acknowledge some of its faults, KCD2 feels like it does a much better job this time around. Not only is it noticeably less clunky or janky, but it also feels less convoluted in areas that I think should be less convoluted. For example, when using a sword as your weapon in the first game, you had 5 directional swings to choose from. In KCD2, that number has been reduced to 4. If 4 still feels like too much to you, consider trying some other weapon types, as many of them only have 3. Or you could focus more on ranged weapons. The combat still maintains a ton of nuance though, and things such as your weapon type versus what type of armor that you're going up against do come into play. KCD2 has also brought with it some new weapons such as crossbows, polearms, and even 15th century firearms, and there's just way more combat perks in general than the first game had. I still have so much to experience with the combat, but I gotta say I am loving it so far. I will say though that its nuance and its realism, such as stamina management and punishing unpreparedness, may not appeal to everyone. There is no denying though that the mechanics are smoother this time around, there's an easier onboarding process, and there's a variety of different weapon types to choose from, making it a bit more accessible, I guess I could say, and likely to suit a variety of different types of player preferences. Since we just talked about a few combat perks, let's talk more about character progression now as a whole. So your Henry will have a main level in this game, which reflects your overall progress through the game and the general prowess of your Henry. Your main level increases as your strength, agility, vitality, and speech levels do, as well as through completing quests. Every few levels, you'll get a perk point to spend on a new perk, and there's a ton of perks to invest into in this game. In fact, when stepping outside of just the main level perks, there's 275 in total. Now, taking a look at a couple of the main level perks right here, we have a local hero perk, which gives you a +2 to strength, agility, vitality, and speech when you're in an area where you have a good reputation. And speaking of reputation, there's an entire reputation system in this game that will affect various gameplay systems and mechanics. Another example of a main level perk is the pacifist perk, which gives you a bonus to your non-combat skills and speech when you don't kill anyone for 12 in-game hours. Many of these perks affect both gameplay and role-playing, which is awesome. And a welcome change from the first game that I noticed, I didn't see any negative affixes or debuffs on the perks. So I think we can say goodbye, or at least mostly goodbye, to that system in Kingdom Come Deliverance 1 where you didn't want to touch half of the perks in the game because they came with these negative debuffs that were just too substantial to ignore. Well, that give and take system I think is mostly gone. Now your stats in this game, which are your strength, agility, vitality, and speech, will also level up when you do things associated with those particular stats, and you'll once again gain perk points as you level up. Using high strength weapons in combat, for example, will level up your strength, which will increase your weapon control and damage. And this is why practicing in combat in this game, going to the training area and just practicing, is good not only for you the player, but also for your Henry. Now, your agility will increase when sneaking around and using weapons that require higher levels of dexterity. Vitality increases by engaging in combat and performing more advanced weapon techniques, and also by overcoming obstacles in the environment. And your speech will increase by engaging in activities such as reading and just conversations. KCD2 utilizes a use it and get better at it type of somewhat more old school RPG system, which I personally think is a great system that I wish more games these days would implement, as you really have that feeling of character progression pretty much at all times, and this progression happens in, I guess I could say, kind of authentic ways. Now, the crazy thing here is that we're really only getting started with character progression, but since this is just an initial impressions video, I'll try to keep it short and sweet. So we also have our secondary stats, which work off of your primary stats, but give more specific benefits. There's charisma, conspicuousness, visibility, noise, speed, persuasion, coercion, impression, domination, presence, and intimidation. And then we have our skills, which are leveled up by using said specific skill. Alchemy, craftsmanship, drinking, horsemanship, houndmaster, scholarship, stealth, survival, and thievery are the skills, and all of these have their own unique list of perks to invest into if you so choose. Many of these skills have a ton of nuance to their use, such as being rewarded with more alchemy XP the more closely that you're able to follow an alchemical procedure when creating a concoction. And speaking of alchemy and also craftsmanship, get ready for some of the most immersive crafting experiences in all of gaming.
It's boiling. You don't have to boil it. See what you've brewed.
A practice try.
Two quite nuanced systems, both of which can help you earn some extra gold. And yes, I did say that drinking is a skill in this game with plenty of fun and funny perks to go with it. You have Tavern Brawler, which gives you a +4 to unarmed combat while drunk, and the Drunken Fool perk allows you to commit some minor crimes while drunk, and sometimes get away with those crimes, basically due to guards having pity on you, I guess. And moving on to the ever so important topic of the open world, and then we'll get into more details on the story, cinematics, and dialogue. The open world in KCD2 starts after the prologue section, so after about an hour and a half or 2+ hours after starting the game. The open world appears to be divided into two separate maps, of which I only experienced a rather small portion of the first map. The second map, I believe, is where the bustling city of Kuttenberg is located, and I'm using some Warhorse gameplay footage that's on YouTube right now so you guys can see that. And also Bohemian Paradise is somewhere on the first or the second map, which is a must-visit place for nature lovers in this game, as well as IRL if you ever visit the Czech Republic. As you can see, KCD2's cartographers are once again on point with the game's map art style and vibe. And what's really cool here is that the maps don't just show you where places are located, they also have some Easter eggs on them and tell a bit of a story. Now, in this hands-on experience, I was allowed to go anywhere and do whatever I wanted to do. This was not a curated experience, but there wasn't a bone in my body that wanted to rush this experience in any way, so I mostly just hung out near the starting town of Troskowitz. I think by now most of you have already realized how beautiful this game truly is. The attention to detail in the environment is well above average. The landscapes are nothing short of breathtaking. It's just an absolute pleasure to be able to immerse yourself in a realistic 15th century Bohemia, which is comprised mostly of modern-day Czech Republic. So much of this game is modeled after realism and real locations. We have Castle Trotsky, the city of Kuttenberg, the foliage, the wildlife, the rock formations, the list goes on. This game does not need floating sky islands or fire-breathing dragons to instill a sense of wanderlust and excitement in players. This is real world beauty, and honestly, I gotta say, it's quite refreshing. Simply walking across a field, riding on a stolen horse, listening to water trickle in a nearby stream, or just watching villagers go about their daily lives. All of this is extremely immersive and quite enjoyable. What I appreciated most about the open world, though, was the sense of freedom or player agency that it instills on you, the player, almost immediately following the prologue, and that freedom is accompanied with a ton of world reactivity. So you start off in this small village or town, but it's really up to you if you want to focus on the main quest, side quests, if you want to work on Henry's progression of his stats and skills, or perhaps you just want to go explore and run off into the horizon. The first hour or so in the open world, I didn't even care about quests. I was stealing horses, stealing food, fist-fighting innocent village folks, becoming the first serial killer of the local inn. The list goes on, and touching back on reactivity, when I was trespassing and villagers would notice me, different NPCs would react in different ways to this crime. Now, many, of course, would call for the guards, but some of them were actually pretty chill and looking out for me.
Can I help you? You should go before people begin to suspect you of stealing.
When you're caught committing crimes in this game, though, the more serious the crime, the harsher the punishment. You can even find yourself being branded or even executed.
All right, let's go. The executioner will beat it out of you with a cane.
All of this also ties into the game's reputation system. If you have a bad reputation, NPCs will treat you less favorably,
I've got my eye on you, you swine.
sometimes outright denying their services to you. But don't worry, there are some rather controversial ways that deal with the church that will allow you to wipe your sins clean and clear that bad reputation right up. Initial impressions wise, the open world reactivity is great. There was this one time where I snuck into a guard's room, I stole and equipped the boots out of his trunk, and when I left the room, he actually knew that I was wearing something of his.
Stop! You're wearing my thing! Give up!
If your Henry is dirty and stinky, this can and will affect the way NPCs treat and respond to you.
Can you smell that too?
Oof. It stinks like something died here.
Having blood on your shirt, or wearing peasant clothes around the rich folk, or a set of flashy, expensive plate armor around peasants, all of this has an effect on the world around you. Now, speaking of armor and just showing you how detailed and how deep some of these systems are, armor such as plate mail or chain mail will affect your noise levels more so than cloth or leather will. So you actually have to take that into account when you're trying to sneak around. And on a side but related note, one huge quality of life improvement with KCD2 over the first game is that we now have the option for one button click presets for different armor sets and, clothing sets that you may have, which is so much easier to switch around your stuff now, which is amazing. And also just the inventory system in general is much easier to understand. It's more organized, more categorized. It's better. In KCD2, I'm getting the impression that it's really up to you, the player, to decide how you want to go about navigating the world, and this also goes for how you choose to navigate quests. And just like in the first game, there can be handfuls of different solutions to solving a single quest, and in some ways, this actually reminds me a bit of Baldur's Gate 3. Every time I screen peeked creators like Neon Knight and Luke Stevens, they were doing something completely different than I was in their own unique ways, and we were all playing the game from the same starting point. It's really cool to see that. Moving on to dialogue, which I found the scripts to be well written.
Stronger dog. And war is a nasty business.
Yeah, Warhorse doesn't hold back in this game, and it's actually kind of refreshing. Funny that I say that as I hold back and censor it in my own video. Dialogue in this game offers plenty of opportunities for rather deep interactions, and I believe KCD2 script actually has more words in it than Baldur's Gate 3 script does. While the gameplay dialogue scenes and animations do lack the polish of the full-on cinematic cutscenes, sometimes it can feel a little awkward just kind of standing there. That's how the first game was too. This didn't really bother me at all. It's good enough, and it's certainly better than the first game. And yes, some random villagers are fist fighting in the background.
Round one, fight.
Now, players will have the opportunity with many NPCs to explore some rich history, or perhaps you want to just stick to the more quest-focused dialogue. It's up to you how deep you want to get with it. And there's even plenty of fun callbacks for players of the first game, letting you discuss past actions such as your relationship with Teresa, or who won a duel between you and Hans.
It seems this isn't my day. I knew I shouldn't have bet with you. You've improved since that last time in Ratai.
Yeah, all right. But I lost in Ratai that time.
Although actual game reactivity for many of these choices from the first game remains unclear to me at the moment. With that said, in KCD2, dialogue in general and overall does offer plenty of real gameplay consequences, like sparking or avoiding combat. Many of the more consequential dialogues are done through using Henry's persuasion skills, such as speech, charisma, might, coercion, domination, and dread. These dialogue skills, like many other aspects of this game, are quite nuanced, as you have to consider what skill fits the situation or NPC that you're talking to. You can't just rely on your highest stat. Sometimes a lower level skill may actually yield better results for you. For example, trying to intimidate a guard while you're wearing peasant clothes and carrying no weapon likely isn't going to work regardless of your might level. Now, KCD2's cinematics also play a large role in its storytelling.
Take cover!
And I feel like they blend these immersive medieval vibes with what I would say is top tier camera work, some of the best medieval music you'll ever hear composed by Jan Volta, and very, very good writing. The cinematics will make you feel like you're watching a fantastic medieval Netflix show. Trust me.
God, there's nobody here. You're just imagining things. Oh, run. No.
The attention to detail in many of these cinematics goes beyond just high fidelity visuals, though. A single side character's smile in one scene was so impactful that it stood out to both me and fellow creator Neon Knight. And this highlights what I would say is the subtle brilliance of this game's storytelling style. Also important to note, many of these cinematics and also the regular dialogue scenes, I would say balance drama and humor perfectly. Humor is of course going to be highly subjective, but I gotta say I was genuinely laughing out loud at a few of these scenes, like actually out loud, to where I looked around and made sure I wasn't disrupting anyone.
Let's hope this water isn't too cold. You wouldn't want your pride and joy shrinking.
And a lot of this I'd say is due to returning standout performances from Tom McKay as Henry and Luke Dahl as Sir Hans Capon, as they create what I would say is one of gaming's best duos.
Good morrow, Wolfpack. Sir Hans Capon here, otherwise known as the Lord of Lipa, otherwise known as the rightful heir of Ratai. Wolfheart has sent me hither with an urgent message for you. Can you guess what it is? Audentes fortuna juvat. Bring on the sequel. Kingdom Come Deliverance 2, 4th of Feb. See you there. Bye.
Audentes fortuna juvat!
Now I don't want to speak too much on story details just yet, but KCD2's story, like the first game, because it is a direct sequel, places Henry, a fictional character, in real 1403 Bohemia, Holy Roman Empire times. His personal story arc is weaved in with real history, which to me creates the potential for a really compelling narrative here, or it already is really compelling as someone who played the first game. Now, I do want to say, if you didn't play the first game, KCD2 does a really good job, especially in the first couple hours, summarizing the important events from the first game in really cool ways, such as through flashbacks and dreams that Henry will experience, and there's just a lot of dialogue that will touch on it. With that said, if you played the first game, you're going to have a much deeper attachment to some of these characters. But at the same time, this is taking place in a different area. I mean, it's the same area, but different maps than the first game. So there's going to be so many new characters. Don't worry too much if you didn't play the first game, but you should if you have time. But in this game, you'll be encountering historical factions, battles, castles, and figures, really important historical figures, while navigating a tale of, I would say, political intrigue, war, and even the beginnings of church reform. Henry, who is now entangled in these larger events, much larger than the life he used to live, is a rather relatable character, as he is certainly not a superhero. In fact, he's a former peasant that still has a lot of peasant in him. The cool thing is that despite these larger affairs going on in Bohemia, Warhorse does a really good job also just immersing you in regular old medieval life, and that's actually one of the highlights of the first game, and I think it will be the same for this one as well. The two main quests from the first game that went unresolved, vengeance for his parents' deaths, as well as finding his father's sword, look like they'll be coming to a conclusion this time around. But the game actually doesn't make those the focal point of at least the early hours of the game, as you'll have some very unique main quests. I also want to say that I appreciate that this game seems to have more of a focus on Henry's struggle with his own morality, as he was wronged in the past, greatly wronged, but now he's starting to question if he's actually starting to become the exact thing that he is fighting against. That adds another layer to this already deep emotional story. And on to the final topic before my summary / conclusion, my initial impressions on performance and bugs. So I was playing on 1440p with high or ultra graphic settings on a PC that had a 4080. Unfortunately, that's all I know about the PC. I'm sorry, but I'll make sure to give more specifics on my full game review. With the PC that I was on though, the game overall ran really well. It looked fantastic, and my FPS was pretty much never noticeably low, even though I wasn't tracking the number. Now, there was very little bit of stuttering, I guess I could say, every once in a great while, usually when entering into the open world from an indoor space, but that's really about it. As for bugs, there were a few bugs, such as a couple NPCs I saw running in place. There was some clipping going on here and there. Sometimes my first attack in combat felt like it didn't register, there wasn't any impact behind it, and I had one loading screen that got stuck. But overall, I'd say it was pretty good, and any bug that I experienced, Toby from Warhorse would take a picture of it and send it off to the Warhorse team. And this is 2 months before official release when I was playing. Do keep in mind though that I was mostly in the earlier parts of the game, and games like KCD2 that offer so much player agency in such a massive world, I would expect to encounter some bugs on your playthrough. Now, how bad these bugs will be and how many of them you'll encounter, I'm not sure, but initial impressions wise, this wasn't a major problem for me. Things were looking pretty good. And finally, in conclusion, and a friendly reminder that these are just initial impressions from the perspective of someone who loved the first game but can still acknowledge many of its faults, KCD2 appears to be shaping up to be what I would say is the most exciting game of 2025, easily. It's an immersive, unique, highly nuanced RPG with deep systems. It has an emphasis on player agency with things such as offering several solutions to solving quests, some of which can be quite player creative. It has very meaningful character progression, and of course, stunning, realistic bohemian environments that are ripe for exploration. The combat is unique, it's rewarding, it's quite realistic feeling for a video game, I'd say, and the story is compelling and very well scripted with beautifully presented movie-like cinematics to go along with it. For fans of history and deep RPGs, this 80 to 100 plus hour experience, for those who don't just want to book it through the main quest, should not be overlooked. Now, I do encourage all of you though to go check out some other impressions videos, as I don't think that this is a game that tries to be liked by all, but in truth, I think that's one of its biggest strengths. The game is not going to hold your hand every step of the way, although I will say that Warhorse has made some noticeable improvements to help with the onboarding process for new players when compared to the first game. And the game has some rather hardcore, some may say too realistic systems and mechanics that, while I greatly enjoy most of them, some gamers may find a few of these systems and mechanics a bit too frustrating for their liking. I'm sure the manual save mod will be popular once again. With that said, watchers of my channel, this one is checking all of the boxes of what I look for in an RPG, and I think many of you are in for a major treat this year. Thank you all so much for watching. Much more KCD2 content to come, including lore, history videos, guides, a let's play, and plenty of live streams right here on my YouTube as well as on my Twitch at WolfheartFPS.